All right, let me know when you guys can hear me, both in the Moore's as the Discord and in the live chat. Sorry for being late here. I just wanted to make sure everything was set up for this leak that I'm going to be doing in this live stream. All right, I'm seeing everyone immediately say they can hear me, so it sounds like YouTube's latency is working a little bit better than usual. And yeah, welcome to the end of August, technically live stream or loose ends. This is where I take questions, anything you want to ask me at the end of every month or the beginning of the next month. Just prove I have nothing to hide. There's not something I'm unwilling to talk about. If you have a problem with anything I've done, you can ask right here. If you tip, I appreciate it. It goes to funding the channel for me, Carbon Cry, Gerard, and of course Dan. But it also makes it easier, or more likely, should I say, for me to notice you. And yeah, also put those tipped questions in right now, and I'll just get to them when I get a chance. But otherwise, I usually like to start these live streams with leaks that I don't have time to put into another video or podcast. And this episode is no different. So let's not waste any time here. You guys know I speak to multiple developers. Some of them, have been on the show. And every now and then I get really good information from them. Like before I got that PlayStation 5 Pro and PSSR specs leak that I put out that kind of exclusively just confirmed everything we now know to be true about the PlayStation 5 Pro because Sony's actually unveiled it. And I actually have footage that I've seen this week of a PS5 Pro running next to a PS5, same game. And this is, there's only so much I can say. Obviously, Sony already tried to take down the channel when I leaked stuff before. So I'm going to be extra careful moving forward if it's a Sony leak because they're litigious. But basically, this is a developer looking to see what they can get away with, right? Like, all right, they have a PS5 Pro dev kit. They're putting their game on it and going, all right, if we turn up the resolution this much, if we try this frame rate, can we turn up the settings more? And I guess what I will say is, before I show you the information, the long story short is I'm told it's very, 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 very easy to turn up, like to be lazy with the PS5 Pro, which I'm sure, as I've leaked, to Sony's plan. Like, yes, there are things you can do to really maximize its performance if you program to the metal versus the PS5 version. But if all you want to do is like take a game that's running, let's say, at 1440p, 60 or something, you can just basically up it to 4K, turn up a couple settings and call it a day. Like, it really is that easy. And it just will always give you that a little bit of ability to do that. But anyways, let's get to the leak. Let's hope this works again like I've done it before. Let me settle in here. You guys know this is how I do leaks typically on live streams. And there it is. So forgive the weird angle, but that is how I like to do it to be safe. Anyways, PS5 Pro early testing leak mid-September 2024. A developer source that consulted on previous PlayStation 5 Pro leaks has sent our team video footage of a PS5 running side by side with the PS5 Pro with the frame rate displayed on it. The PlayStation 5 version of this game was running 1080p to 1600p dynamic resolution, a mix of medium to high settings like you see most PlayStation games run at. And it generally was trying to get close to 60 most of the time, but I can say watching the frame time chart, it was frequently dropping below 50. I'd say half of the time it was above 50, and sometimes it dropped even kind of closer to 40. So it's like an unstable 60 frames, generally running around 1440p, but sometimes higher, sometimes lower, medium high settings. The PlayStation 5 Pro was running at 1600p to 2160p dynamic res. They're not even using PSSR yet, and it was holding that. All settings were set to maximum quality. This dev told me they were just, messing around. They ran out of settings to turn up. That is turned up to max, so it's basically the max ultra version of the PC, what you would be able to run in PC if you turn up all settings. And it was locked at 60. I didn't see any dips. It was like just a straight line if you watch Digital Foundry at 60. And I've asked, well, okay, why is it dynamic resolution then if it's just locked at 60? And the person said, yeah, they're going to look into 120 hertz modes and just 4K modes. And in fact, they may even, and I don't think, let me be very clear about this next point here before I say it. I don't think they're going to do an 8K mode, but apparently the PS5 Pro, allows you to output an 8K, which this dev told me, which I guess I don't think this is new information here, but apparently the PS5 really couldn't even output 8K, I think, in most settings, like maybe you could put an 8K picture on screen. I don't know. So I don't know why Sony ever put 8K on the PS5 boxes, but the point is, not only can you output 8K now, there's like a script or like a box you can check to enable it in the game. So do I think a lot of devs are going to do that? No, but I wouldn't be surprised if some indie games did. And because they can easily run 4K 60 in this game, yeah, the person's probably going to just run it just to see what happens, if it breaks it or something. But anyways, let us get back to the information at hand here. Zoom in more on it. So yeah, I think that's very exciting. 4K 60 sounds very, very easy for them, and they're going to mess around with other settings too. Let me try to make sure this thing actually focuses here. Let me see. There we go. Anyways, also some more details. The PS5 Pro, like I said, has an option for 8K. The PS5 Pro also has access to another 1.2 gigabytes of memory due to memory system efficiency. That's what it was in a Sony document. I don't know really how. The dev isn't sure either, but they are giving devs on PS5 Pro access to more RAM. So they think that's enough to make it run at a higher resolution. And I want to actually drill down on why I think it might be as well. So if you think about it, I think a lot of people are going to look at the PS5 Pro and they're going to go, oh, now it's running games at 4K instead of running games at 1440p, right? But that's not really true. Most games have a dynamic res. Half of them have some mode that can run in 4K or 1600p dynamically there. Even if it's at 30 frames a second, if it's able to run at 30 frames a second, any setting in 4K in the game, that means the PS5 had enough RAM to run in 4K, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't be running at 30 frames at all. If you're running out of the RAM, if you ran out of RAM, it would just plummet to like 10 frames a second. Okay. So, and then if you also think about this, even games that run at like 1600p max, like let's say there's games that do a dynamic res and it like, again, like this game, for example, apparently on PS5 dynamically runs between 1080p and 1600p. Right, but if it's able to hit 1600p, that means that it has enough VRAM in the base PS5 to hit 1600p. It has to have that extra buffer there anytime the dynamic resolution might switch to 1600p. So if you think about it, really Sony only needed to give access to enough RAM to go from 1600p to 4K in most games, and this dev says 1.2 gigabytes is enough. Like basically, put that 0.2 gigabytes and the 1.2 will be used for PSSR, and then that other extra gigabyte, maybe some of that will be used for extra ray tracing. Some of it will be used to run in 4K instead of 1600p. So this dev doesn't seem to think there's a real issue with the amount of memory. Also, this was interesting. On one of the documents, it said that in practice, the PS5 Pro exceeds 28% bandwidth increase. Now, 28% is the difference between the 14 gigabit per second GDDR6 and the PS5 base and the, I think, 18 gigabit per second in the PS5 Pro. I don't know. This is probably due to things like better memory compression in RDNA 4, and just I don't know if there's something with the cache as well, but just in general, yes, it's a 28% bandwidth increase, but it is a far better architecture than what is in the PS5 base. Even if you're not programming to the metal, it just inherently handles bandwidth better. So that was interesting. Another interesting thing here. PSSR just got an update from version 9.0 to 9.4, and I am told that's because devs were complaining about image quality issues. So this one took me a bit aback here. I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. It's still technically in beta until the PS5 Pro launches, but I don't know what to make of that. Who knows? You see people complain about things all the time. I remember before RDNA 1 came out, Adored TV had a leak half a year before its launch where they were complaining about the drivers. People always complain about growing pains when they're preparing to launch a product, so I wouldn't assume this means PSSR isn't very good. What I will say is, at least as of like a month ago, the version of PSSR Sony had wasn't as good as DLSS. Now they just updated it. Maybe it'll be as good as DLSS, but this makes me have a hunch that it's close to DLSS, but not quite there in quality. And when I say DLSS, I don't even mean 3.6 or 7 or whatever DLSS they're on. I mean, maybe close to DLSS, like 3.4, whatever that would be called. But that's just something to look for. Again, don't take that as a fact. That part from me is speculation or inference. But what I will say is, again, as of a month ago, PSSR apparently didn't seem as good as DLSS. Maybe it is by launch, though. We'll see. Also, final thing, and this is interesting to me. According to this dev, there is no worry about running out of RAM. Sony added just enough usable memory in general, and the I'm sorry, let's skip down the high CPU frequency mode. Now, for those who don't remember, Sony has announced that if a dev wants to, they can give more power to the CPU for more frequency than the base PS5. That's really all they've said, though, right? And one would assume, oh, so what does that mean? The GPU runs 10% slower, so the CPU is 10% faster. Apparently not. In documentation, apparently the high frequency mode by Sony adds 10% higher frequency. So, like, I think it's 3.85 gigahertz instead of 3.5 gigahertz, but the GPU's performance only goes down 1.5%. So I would have to assume that that means that's going to be the default mode, high frequency mode, for any game that struggles to hit 60 hertz because of the CPU. Although, again, I have to stress this: the overwhelming majority of games do not have issues hitting 60 hertz with an 8-core Zen 2. Go look at the recent Zen 5 benchmarks on Tech Power Up. Look at their 720p average. You will see Zen 2 CPUs above 100 hertz on average. At least half of games can hit 120 hertz, I believe, with Zen 2. It's fine. The other half, maybe not. And there will probably be a small amount of games that struggle a little to hit 60 with what's in the PS5. And that is where they're like, okay, we'll lower your GPU performance by 1% to up your CPU by 10%. So we can try to get to a more locked 60 hertz. And yeah, that's going to do it for this. Let me switch back to my ugly mug here. All right, here we go. Back to me with my goofy camera. All right. And so there you go. That's the PS5 Pro information I'm leaking today. I think it's pretty exciting. I think it shows that, again, you have to when you talk about the PS5 Pro right now, you basically have to put things into two different buckets: pricing, everything else. Pricing, I don't like it. Everything else seems like a well-designed console that they could have probably, because it has the same amount of RAM, might even use the same board. Almost, it even shares the same plates. I mean, I think they almost, not entirely, but almost literally just like took a PS5, unsoldered a CPU, soldered another one in, and just put faster RAM. This really shouldn't cost, I don't think, more than an extra $50 to $100 more than the base PS5 to manufacture. I can't imagine much more than that. So yeah, look, I think it should have been, I think the killer price would have been like $529. So you could say, get our console with a game instead of a Series X. And it's like, well, it doesn't come with a disk drive. It's like, yeah, but you can get a game with it for the same price. Then go buy a disk drive if you want one. Most people buy digital. So we're just giving gamers choice. I think that's the price I would have pushed for if I worked at Sony, in addition to a price drop for the Slim. But I have to admit, they are outselling Xbox. They're outselling PS4 in line sales. They clearly think they can get away with a crazy price. And yeah, I do think they're, as I said in the video I put out earlier this week, which check that out if you missed it. I think it's a very good PlayStation video that kind of outlines what I think Sony's strategy is here. I think they're testing out if they can get away with higher prices before they decide how crazy to go with like a 2 nanometer, 32 gigabyte PlayStation 6 in a few years. So, but yeah, the console itself, that's the pricing bucket. Moving on, the console itself seems like a well-designed console. It seems like, and if you really think about what I just told you guys, you have a game here that, like on the base PS5, in this leaks example, struggles to keep 60 hertz locked, and often drops to 45. What does that mean? It probably means it's averaging 55 frames a second. And then you have this other one here that's locked 60, never drops, meaning it could probably run at 70, 80 frames per second if it really wanted to. And then also with higher settings, this might be an outlier. This might be a better outcome than most games will achieve. I don't know, but it does show that effectively doubling frame rates of fidelity mode, which is what Mark Cerny talked about. Here's a data point that directly suggests it can easily do that, actually. And if you think about it, that's not all that surprising, assuming it does have enough bandwidth, which they claim it does. We'll have to see in testing. But assuming it has enough bandwidth, you are talking about something that has a GPU about 50% faster on paper. Well, it's a better architecture. We're going to 3 to 4. I mean, look at Strix right now. RDNA 3.5 and AMD's latest APUs, the 880M, the 12 compute unit model, benchmarks 15-20% faster than the 12 compute unit RDNA 3 model. And RDNA 3 per compute unit is usually 5 to 10% faster than RDNA 2. So yeah, on paper, they have like a 50% faster GPU, but then you take into account IPC from RDNA 2 to RDNA 3 to RDNA 4. And I think it's pretty easy to believe that it could get to almost double. Then you add PSSR, easily double. That's clearly what they're playing. And I'm sure when you turn up ray tracing, it's over double if you were to just crank that to a crazy degree. But yeah, so it is interesting to see that this, they hit the performance that they're saying, at least in this test. And I guess it'll be up to people to decide if they want to pay 50% more for double the performance or not. All right, let me see here. Let me get to some questions about the PS5 Pro before we move on to the Zen 5 section, because I actually do have Zen 5 leaks today as well. But let me get through here. So first, TNT Doc put in a tipped question. Thank you, and asked, any leaks on noise levels of the PS5 Pro, or again, is it a similar shit show with what the PS4 Pro was? Yeah, so the PS4 Pro I'm accustomed to was silent, but I know that I got a late stage PS4 Pro, and I know a friend who has a PS4 Pro with the original 3-prong connector, and yeah, it's a lot louder. Um, I don't know the final noise on it, but let me put a timestamp down for this one as well. From what I know, the PS5 Pro does not seem to be trying to use a bunch more power. I would suggest it's probably in the same ballpark of power usage as the PS5. Because of that, and because it basically uses the same chassis, I don't know why it would be any louder. You know what I mean? Like, or if it is, it's not like the original PS4 Pro's noise difference. It's basically the same console. It just uses a more expensive node to give you more performance at the same power. I mean, you still have Sony, as I just showed you, having a mode where you can trade, 1% GPU performance for 10% more CPU. Why would they be doing that unless they're trying to keep power consumption and therefore noise and thermals under control? So I don't think it's going to be loud. I don't. From what I've seen, I haven't listened to one, but I have seen what they look like. I have seen the power consumption, like what the chassis suggests for power consumption. So I don't think it's going to be loud. Let me put that down. PS5 Pro noise. I'll probably know a lot more about that soon, too, by the way. So stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to Moore's Law is Dead so you don't miss when I do tell you more about that. Let's see. We got an Xbox question. Moore's Law is Dead. Can you say what engine the game was running in? I'm not going to. I do know. I'm not going to because I don't want to hurt any contacts. That could narrow it down, who I'm talking to, potentially, if someone really went for it. And God knows Sony's done it before. So I'm going to choose not to say. We get to some more PlayStation questions here. So Kinahoon25 writes in from the Patreon. Thank you for supporting me there. Remember, supporting the Patreon, you can submit questions for free ahead of time. Says, Tom, do you see a scenario where Sony could drop the price of the PS5 Pro to something manageable like $550? Especially since that $80 disc drive is sold separately. I was very excited for the PS5 Pro, but at $780 total, I just can't spend that much on a console. And this is just a foreshadowing of the inevitable future of an $800 PS6, isn't it? I don't know about $800 PS6. I only think that would happen if the PS5 Pro sells out like crazy and they can never keep it in stock, no matter how much they decide to make. I do think they're testing out, though, if they can get away with like 700, 650, 600. Because again, watch my last PlayStation. A lot of you seem to have missed my last PlayStation video that came out this week. I outline how, from what I'm told, the PS6 is going to have at least 32 gigabytes of RAM, and the PS6 is likely to use 2 nanometer. That is not going to be cheap. That means Sony knows they're probably going to have to charge $600 no matter what, especially after inflation that we've seen happen over the past few years. What they're going to say is, so do we go with 32 gigabytes in the same size die, or even a smaller die? Do we go with a 200 millimeter square die instead of a 300 millimeter square die, but 2 nanometer with 32 gigs of RAM and call it a day? Or does everyone buy the Pro at 700 and it's like, okay, so we can maybe do 650 or 700 and actually make it a full generational uplift? Either that, or if the PS5 Pro is rejected at $700, my suspicion would be Sony would say, okay, well, we need to wait until we can give them the performance they want cheaply. And so maybe we won't release it in 3 years. Maybe we'll wait 4 years for costs to come down, or for when costs are perfect, whenever that might be. But anyways, do I see a scenario with them dropping prices? To actually answer your question, if it entirely bombs, yes. But it would have to entirely bomb, because I don't think they're going to make a ton of these. So, right, if they expect to sell 10% of the volume of PS5 total, if that is going to be PS5 Pro overall, so that means out of, like, let's say 100 million, let's just say that PS5s they make, only 10 million of them are going to be PS5 Pros. I don't know how much Sony would go that they care, right? Because if they only make 10 million, they might just sell out no matter what to the fans. There's at least 5 million to 10 million. Maybe even, I don't remember the last time I checked. I know there's at least 5 million hardcore PlayStation fans where you can tell they just buy everything. And then there's probably 20 million decently hardcore. Sony might say it's going to sell out if it's 1,000. Like this is a vanity project. So if it'd have to bomb, and if it did though, retailers would mark down the price. Yes, and we saw that happen to the PlayStation VR too. Sony charged way too much for the VR2. I want to be clear about that as well. As egregious as the pricing is for the PS5 Pro, I think the PSVR2 is even more overpriced. I'm sorry. It was just stupid compared to any other VR device. It didn't have PC support right away. It wasn't wireless. That one was worse. And so, what happened? No one bought it. And then they dropped the price, sells out. So I don't know. Clearly, Sony isn't thinking they learned that much of a lesson from the PSVR2's flop. But we have seen from that flop that if they need to drop prices, they will, but only if they really need to. Intel Fanboy writes in, who is the PS5 Pro for at these prices? People who want the best console. It's actually an easy question to answer. It's a $1,000 PC for like $700. I mean, this is going to be, by the time RDNA 4 comes out, this is probably the equivalent of like a $400 to $500 graphics card. We'll say at this point, a $100 CPU, if we're being honest. I mean, let's be clear about that. 2 terabyte SSD, that's really fast. So you're talking, probably about a $120 SSD. So what are we even at now? We're like at 620, add in a motherboard, 700, add RAM, 8, 8. Like if you had to build this, you'd have to buy RAM separately, add in a power supply. Yeah, I mean, cooling, I think it's about a $1,000 PC that they're selling for $700. And there's a lot of people that look around at Windows issues right now. And I think they're just hoping that the people that want a game on console get it, because it is only bad relative to building your own PC, but it is far worse than I think any PlayStation console in history, right? Like, so that's how you put it. Is it still cheaper than the equivalent PC? Probably. Is it a worse deal than every other console Sony's launched? Yes, definitely. Compressed AI Blocks writes in and says PS5 Pro price is high. There's no question about that. What do you think Sony could have done to make $700 more enticing? I feel software is where they're lacking in terms of PS5 titles that aren't cross-generational and aren't remakes or remasters. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. They have some next-gen games, of course, but for the most part, yeah, I don't know. I would if there was a GTA 6 launching right now, or a new The Last of Us, or a new IP. I mean, we know that there's some exclusives coming, aren't there? Like to PlayStation at some point. So, like, there's stuff. A new Final Fantasy. Would that have helped? Yes. Also, would it have helped if Sony charged $700, but the thing had 24 gigabytes of 20 gigabit per second memory, infinity cache, 3 gigahertz clocks, so that they actually were only making a slight profit at $700? Would that have helped? Yes. But ultimately, I think it's not about the performance. It's just the price. $700 is a price people don't want to see no matter how strong it is, right? Like, think of the PS3. I mean, that launched for $600 and it came with a 60 gigabyte hard drive, which, believe it or not, people, if you're young, those are really expensive back then. Came with Wi-Fi. Xbox didn't. It came with a Blu-ray player. Those could sell for $1,000 separately. But people didn't want to see $599. It doesn't matter if it was a fair deal to a lot of people. People wanted a console for $400 or less. I think now people have accepted $500 as fair for a console, and people didn't want to see $700. So they could make it 30%, 50% faster. I still think people would complain about the price because the price is the issue. There's a difference between price performance and then just total price people don't want to pay. That's the problem with the PS5 Pro, or at least I think it is. We'll see how it sells. Hugo Ander Kiwi writes in and says, regarding the PS5 Pro, do you see value in some retailers offering in-store credit to customers by trading in their existing PS5 for about $350 to $400, depending on if it was the disc or discless version, and buying a PS5 Pro for the equivalent amount? This would, in my view, up the value of the Pro as you can get it cheaper, therefore. Yeah, like $300, $400 net. Would you consider trading yours in for that? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I played enough. I hadn't thought about trading in a console. I suppose that certainly would make it more worth it. And I think that would be a wise move for retailers to do that. Yeah, not much else to say. Question generated by Jensen Wang's AI, right? He says, where do you think the PS5 Pro will sit in comparison to the RDNA 4 launch lineup? We know the base PS5 is basically identical in performance to an ARC 6700. Yeah, it is pretty much in my testing. So where do you think this will sit, assuming the highest end RDNA 4 GPU will be called the 8800 XT? So you're saying, assuming the top chip for RDNA 4 is called the 8800 XT, what level of performance, where in the lineup are we after that? I mean, look, it has 60 compute units. I believe the 8800 XT is going to have 64 compute units. They're both going to be 256-bit. Now, I don't believe the PS5 Pro has infinity cache. At least they're not saying it does. I think they would if it did. But it does have more, I think, L2 cache per compute unit. At least the PS5 had more L, and so did the Xbox Series X, by the way. And so do most of their APUs have more like L2 cache per compute unit because they don't have infinity cache, so they have to do that to give. So there is a little bit of a wiggle room there, just because, like for example, the Series X and PS5 don't have infinity cache doesn't mean they're at as much of a disadvantage as you might think. But anyways, um, we saw RDNA 1 get away without infinity cache, and that one's about as strong as a 6700 as well, isn't it? Or I guess 6600. Anyways, I'm rambling here. I mean, remove 4 compute units, give it slightly slower memory. We're already looking at something around an 8700 XT, but then I assume it's going to be clocked 10 to 20% lower, and it doesn't have infinity cache. So I think the PS5 Pro is probably like an 8700 XT at best, at worst 8700 if that exists. You know what I mean? So like not the barely cut down model, not the 7700 XT equivalent, but if there was a 7700 or maybe a bit better than that, that's what I would assume. However, it isn't the same architecture entirely. There are custom things Sony did with the geometry engine in the PS5 and streamlining, like I think it was heat dispersion basically and density for the Zen 2 variant. They have a custom Zen 2 really in PS5 and PS5 Pro. So it's not a one-to-one. It never will be, but that's what I think of it as, is probably like an 8700 or 8700 XT. I saw some people saying it's an RX 6800. That's not fucking true. An RX 6800 is 2 generations of architectures worse, and I think slower clocks as well, and slower RAM, slower clocks, 2 generations older. No, it is not a 6800. It's stronger than that, especially when it comes to ray tracing, probably wildly stronger. Alex Smith writes in and says, $1 million question, Tom. We know you game on your PS5 occasionally. Will you be upgrading to a PS5 Pro or not? No judgment either way. I don't know. If it was $500 for me, it's an easy decision probably to get, just because it's like, well, yeah, it's cheap, like the price of one graphics card, and you can boot up a game, and sometimes I just don't want to game in my office, right? I have a gaming PC in here, and sometimes I just want to sit on the couch. A I know that's an argument that annoys PC gamers, including. I'm not saying you can't play your PC on a couch. I'm not one of those lunatics who thinks all gaming PCs cost $5,000 and somehow can't connect to an HDMI port on a TV. I've seen console fanboys say some insane shit. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it's just being able to play it in another room. You press the on button, it's on, game boots instantly, and you're off to the races. You know, $500, having locked 60, I would like. That's an easy decision. At 700, I don't know. Maybe. I'd say maybe. But if I get it, it's not like, it's just because I know I'll get my money's worth out of it. It's not because I think that this is a bargain compared to what I thought it should be. Chris Rich writes in and he says, "Is wait, no, let's do this question first." Chris Rich writes in, he says, "Is 30 frames per second gaming finally dying? Is the PS5 Pro launch in the PS5 Pro launch? It was mentioned that 75% of games use the performance mode rather than the quality mode." I thought that was interesting actually in the presentation. Mark Cerny goes, 75%. Our statistics show 75% of gamers turn on performance mode. Um, might the PS6 therefore be 60 frames per second minimum? I find it unlikely Sony would mandate 60 frames per second. I do suggest they're going to nudge devs to go with that from now on. And what I would hope, and I've said this before, I believe in the NX Gamer. Last time NX Gamer was on Broken Silicon, I said to him I would hope they'd mandate a 40 hertz VRR mode. In other words, Sony would say to the dev, yes, you can have a 30 frames per second mode in your game if you want to. Obviously, you need to, because not everybody has variable refresh rate TVs. A lot of people do now, but not everybody. So if you want to go for 30, go for it. We're not going to tell you not to go and, walking simulator maximum graphics mode if you don't want to. You can do it. But what we are going to do is mandate that you have an option in your game to uncap the frame rate to 40 frames per second VRR, or maybe even add it in the menu and just say it's a beta, experimental mode, and just so at least the gamer themselves can go into the PlayStation menus and turn that on, because uncapping to 40 alone feels so much better than 30. And I would also suggest that if Sony tells devs you have to have at least a 40 VRR mode, you're kind of nudging the dev to de facto allow 60, because if they have to allow it to go above 40, they're probably likely to add a 60 hertz mode as well. But that's what I would do if I was Sony. Obviously, you can have a 30 hertz mode. We're not going to remove that. We want you to maybe have it for eye candy shots that we can share online. But I will say this, you got to have us at least uncap it for the gamers that want it, because the data shows 75% of people are tired of 30 frames per second. I would hope they would at least do that. All right. Michael Mooney writes in, I guess let me put a new timestamp here. Actually, let me get to the sponsor. So, as usual, this video is sponsored by Micro Center. Micro Center is now opening up a new location in Santa Clara. So, if you're in the Santa Clara look for that. They've officially entirely opened the one in Miami as well. And actually, if you visit these new stores, you can get a 128 gigabyte flash drive for free. You don't need even to be a new customer. Just sign up to check out the store. They'll give you a free flash drive for coming in. So I really recommend you do that. And then, also, they have I've links in the description to their best deals this month and their PC builder, which is actually really cool. I've checked it out. Micro Center's PC builder allows you to customize an entire PC on their website, choose everything, what case, what CPU, what GPU, click build it for me, wait a few hours, drive in and pick it up. They built it for you. They installed Windows for you. It's all ready to go. So that's actually a really, really cool tool that I like that they have there for a pretty reasonable price, I think, as well. And then, of course, they also have the best deals on everything. I mean, as usual, I like to check out what the most insane thing is right now. Let's see. Like, because usually it would be like the 7800 X3D with 32 gigabytes of free RAM. Well, do they have, what is the 7600 X3D going for? Come on, let me type. Let me see here, because I know they have that new 7600 X3D exclusive CPU as well. Yeah, that comes with 32 gigabytes of RAM for free. I know this is a paid advertisement, but this is genuine surprise that they're giving you that for free. So yeah, right now at Micro Center, I guess you can get one of the best gaming chips, the 7600 X3D, that ties the 14900K in gaming. That's before the 14900K breaks, by the way. And it's only $299, and they give you 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000. It's not even the cheapest RAM, for free. So yeah, if you need to do a new budget build or even a mid-range build, honestly, I think that if you're mostly gaming, the 7600 X3D is not going to hold back almost any application unless you really are doing production work. So yep, again, even if you're within a few hours, I love being sponsored by these guys because they're insane deals. I think it's worth your time to drive there. So click on those links in the description below. That alone helps out the channel. And yeah, support Moore's Law's Debt by checking out Micro Center today. All right, let's get back to the questions at hand. We've got an Xbox question here, and I want to do a timestamp to it. All right, Xbox next. So, Michael Mooney writes in and says, how should Xbox spec out their console in 2026 to stand out from PS5 Pro and PS6? Well, I wouldn't be 100% sure it's coming out in PS6. Although at this point, with how bad Xbox is doing, maybe it will be because it needs to be. Although, again, you guys understand though, right, that it takes time to make a console. I leaked at the beginning of this year that they just started like official development of Xbox because they were like, of the next Xbox with AMD, because they were like bidding Intel against AMD, dragging their feet. I mean, the people at AMD told me they give it a 50-50 chance there isn't an next gen Xbox as late as last year. So Sony started development, like real high level development, specking, pathfinding what gamers will want, like half a year or a year, I think, before Microsoft has even started. So if Xbox wants to launch, and I assume the PlayStation 6 will launch 2027 is kind of, I asked again recently, probably 2027, 2028. So you're saying Microsoft's going to launch console before Sony, even though it's starting development later than them? I guess they could, but that's going to be a rushed console. Although, again, their sales are falling apart, so maybe it should be a rushed console. What should the specs be if it were in 2026? I think 2027 is the better time for both of them, to be honest, because I think the truly distinguishing feature for a next gen console is likely to be AI, and actually useful AI. I don't just mean like making cat pictures where an eyeball's on its butthole or something and just can't even understand what you're trying to say. I think by 2027, we might be to a place where an AI engine, an NPU, and an APU can maybe understand what you're typing or saying loosely, so that when you're playing Fallout 6, Fallout 5, you don't have to choose between four options. You can just type, let's attack that village, and the AI engine takes that in and goes, okay. Or say it, let's attack that village, and it actually understands you. that would be a next gen feature that would really stand out from the previous gen. And they could probably still get that working on the previous gen. But what would happen is you would say, let's attack that village. And then the PS5 version has to run the AI model on the GPU and then starts running it. And the person just starts going, hmm, for a whole minute. And then, yeah, let's go. Whereas on next gen consoles, they just know what you're trying to do. They could also, of course, use the AI engine to generate like more random events and more scripted events easier to be run on there and like for decision trees. So the question then becomes if that's probably going to be a distinguishing factor in next gen. And I personally think it will be. I don't think 8K is going to be what makes you guys upgrade. Okay. I think it's going to be all about almost every game 60 hertz. Half of them are 120 hertz. And we have AI engines that make the games better. Are those actually going to be ready by 2026, Michael? Maybe, we are in 2024. This is a rapidly evolving industry, but I think you'd want to be sure it's ready then before you commit to launching a console that year. And you'd also want to be sure what specs you'll need to do it. Like 300 tops, maybe? I don't 400, 500, I don't know. Like what is the exact amount you need? It's just enough to contain this language model. And that is something that I would be a little skeptical that Microsoft or Sony would be perfectly able to nail if it was 26. I think we're going to see AI continue to explode, but there will be some bubble that pops over the next year. But that's when we're going to also start getting the real applications, that might actually use Strix or Lunar Lake's NPU. And then that's going to take another year for us to know what's really usable and good. So that's 2026 when they'd have it completely figured out. I would more target 2027 if I were them. Otherwise, it's hard for me to answer because I don't know exactly what you'll need to run those models for another year. So besides that, I mean, what do you want me to say? At least 32 gigabytes of RAM. I would want it to be double the performance of the PS5 Pro, so that it's like you really can, and that's pretty much all I can say, right? Whatever, some 10 or 12 core powerful CPU, but not too powerful. It doesn't need to be crazy. 32 gigabytes RAM at least, and a good AI engine to run those models. But I still don't think we're quite to where we need, like the SSD in the PlayStation 5, I think surprised a lot of people. So it's like, would they have known they could have done that too early before they figured out exactly what they could do by 2020 when it would come out? Anyways, though. Paul Gaming Live says, "Can you say what engine the game was running it?" I already responded to that. No, I don't know if you asked me again or if I'm just rereading it because no, I think you asked it again. Okay. So here's some more questions. Oh, that's a silly question, but I'll answer that one. Okay. Chances of GTA 6 at 60 frames per second on the PS5 Pro. My gut says 50-50, but I feel like I see, I don't wanna say because I don't know, so I don't want my hopes to get in the way of being right and making me look stupid. What I will say is the PS5 Pro is capable of 60 hertz if they do this right. I mean, this thing is gonna have to run, most of the time, these things are not CPU bottlenecked, so if they want it to, it can, but yeah, I don't know. I think 50-50. I think 50-50, but there's a part of me that goes, people are vastly overestimating how much CPU performance you need. Again, I said it earlier. Go to Tech Power Up, look at their Zen 5 review, look at where Zen 2 CPUs are in 720p. On average, they're above 100 frames a second. It's hard for me to believe GTA couldn't at least deliver with the high CPU frequency mode in the PS5 Pro at least a shaky 60 hertz. It'd be hard for me to believe. I just refuse to believe that wouldn't be some stupid choice they're making. Mr. Unknown asks, "Is Sony switching to ARM for the PS6?" No, no. Well, why would they? Lunar Lake's more efficient than the X Elite, isn't it? Or is it about the same? Like it's about the same. But that's the point, right? Strix and Lunar Lake trade blows with the X Elite in battery life, depending on if you're doing heavy or light workloads. Uh, no, I think they're going to use X86. Not 100%, I guess, but I think they will. Brand Muffin writes in, "Will PCIe 4.0 bottleneck the RTX 4090? I assume you mean 5090. Not much, no. There's always a bottleneck. When you say bottleneck, do you mean 5%? Probably. Probably bottleneck the 5090, 5-10%. But will it make it so it has half the performance? No. Darkborn writes in with a tip. Thank you. It is expensive, yeah, assuming you mean the PS5 Pro, but we got to remember inflation from 4 years ago is over $100. I think it's a decent deal, but for a niche enthusiast audience, I would agree it's a decent deal, not a great deal like the Series X and PS5 were at launch. $500 for a $1,000 PC with a Blu-ray drive was crazy, but it's a decent deal. But for a niche enthusiast audience, sure. The one thing I got to push back on though is this inflation thing. Is there Hmm, how do how do I put this? Is there inflation overall compared to 2020, or really compared to 2019? If we're being honest, yes, there is. But the PlayStation 5 Pro isn't made out of eggs and milk, where a lot of the inflation's still there. So, on the one hand, relative to how much more expensive food has gotten, you might go, well, so it's not really that bad of a deal. But on the other hand, tech hasn't gone up, has come down. Graphics cards have gotten cheaper. See, Micro Center's giving away one of the best gaming CPUs for $300 with free RAM. Clearly, they wouldn't do that unless they could afford to. And I talked to people there, like the margin on it is there. Like they're maybe giving you the free RAM to get you in the door, maybe, but there's not. They're making more than $10 on that CPU. Put it that way. I'm not going to say how much, but they can afford it more than you'd think. And they have a special deal for that RAM too, I believe, from G Skill. So that because it's marketing for G Skill basically. So tech inflation has not been as high as egg inflation, is all I'm trying to say. So don't think, RAM prices right now are cheaper than they were in 2020. Silicon costs are also lower. I think they cut prices on a lot of them, depending on the node. The only thing that I'm sure is still a bit higher is shipping costs. So I don't know that there's really been that much tech inflation right now compared to 2020. 2022 compared to 2020? Sure. 2024 compared to 2020? I don't think so. So Sony is making money on this, man. I'm just saying they are. Um, any improvements for PSVR 2 games with the PS5 Pro? Arian writes in. I mean, yeah, of course. It's performance is performance. It will perform better by 50 to 100%. Something or and in ray trace titles more than that. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. Dwight Baldwin writes in and says, "Do you think the PS6 will have Blackwell-like performance?" And you sent it twice, so thanks for double asking the question. Um, look, what does Blackwell like mean? A 50, 60? I bet it beats that. But I mean, besides that, I don't really have much to say. I mean, because if it launches in 3 years, I would assume they don't want to launch it unless it's twice the performance of at least the PS5 Pro, which actually I can probably do a spitball here on the minimum I would expect. Let's see. I estimate the PS5 Pro. Let's just be a little conservative. Say 7800 XT. I think it might be a bit better than that, but clocked a little lower, probably slower RAM. Yeah, let's just say 7800 XT to be conservative. What's double that? The 4090 isn't even double the 7800 XT. So I would expect, and again, everyone always says I'm stupid, but it's like, yeah, guys, look, I was right about the PS5's performance being wildly higher than the previous gen. This always happens. It's a moving target. You got to give it years to go by. In years from now, do I think the PS6 will at least double the 7800 XT, which is what I would estimate the PS5 Pro performs like? Yes, I would. Okay, for that matter, then do I think the 5090 will be over double the performance of a 7800 XT? Yes, but we could be saying this is like 5080 performance, not the PS5 Pro, the PS6 in years from now. So if is that Blackwell performance for you, then sure, I guess it's kind of Blackwell performance, right? Um, all right. Having heard all the questions, do you think all of the okay, Albert Gonzalez writes in, having heard all of these questions, do you think all the improvements Sony made to the PS5 Pro are worth the $200 increase of the regular PS5? I mean, if you like the eye candy and you got the money, yeah. I mean, I do. I just don't think it's worth it to most people. Most people don't buy a console to try to game at 4K 60 lock. They just want decent frame rates, a smooth experience, and um, you know, the problem is I think the PS5 base should be like 400 or 350 now, right? Like, so if I assume that's 350, then this would be double the price for double the performance. I'd say it's really not as good of a deal because you're running the same games. But if you like the eye candy and stuff, yeah, I don't know. It comes with double the storage as well. look, there's a lot of expensive things out there, guys. iPhones are over $1,000 here a lot of the time, and from that perspective, a console that just sits there for like 5 years and just does its job without complaining or needing you to replace it when you drop it in the lake or something, like a phone does. I look, I'm not saying it's unfair compared to other things around it. It's just definitely not the deal you usually expect from a console. So are you rich? Well, yeah, sure. Everything's worth it to you then. Why not? But if you're not, no, I don't. You can play the same games on a base PS5, man. Like so that's my thoughts on that. Although considering if you want a disk drive, it probably is worth it over the base now because with a disk drive, what the base PlayStation's $530. So now you're but you'd still have to do so. What you're like 780 over 530, 50% more. Basically, you're paying for double the performance and more storage. I guess again though, but that's not. Is it a better deal than the existing PlayStation 5 Slim if you have the money? Yes, but I also think the Slim should be cheaper. So, um, let me see here. Du-du-du. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, is the 7900 XT when it came out? Now it's fine. It's like $600 now. But when the 7900 XT came out for $900, and they were like, well, yeah, but it's like half the price of a 4090 for 70% the performance. I go, sure, but the 4090 costs too much. So, um, let me see here. Zach Miklas writes in with a rather large tip and says, "Thanks for all the content you make for us, man. Keep it going. Grab yourself a beer on me." Thank you. I think I'll grab myself a few beers. Thank you for the support. What else do we got here? Naughty DJ Aftershock writes in says, "From the sounds of it, a chiplet PS6 is unlikely." Yeah, I don't know. It's not even decided yet. Let me also put down a timestamp for this PS6 chiplets because I continue to think there's this weird misconception here about like chiplets and if you should use them. Um, like here's a good example. RDNA 4 should come out in a few months. It will be a monolithic, not chiplet design that probably costs a similar amount as a 7800 XT or 7900 GRE, while beating them both in performance with lower power. AMD isn't using chiplets and they're giving you a better product this year. You don't need chiplets to make something good. And they really don't make sense, in my opinion, from what I can, from just looking at the landscape, unless your product is over 200, like 50 millimeters squared, like, or even maybe over 300. But there's an and those chiplets are shared with another product, right? You look at what's going on with the like supply constraints in Meteor Lake. It's in the news. Go Google it. Meteor Lake has had supply constraints by packaging. Packaging is bottlenecking because they need to package all these Meteor Lake chiplets together. Meanwhile, what also uses Meteor Lake chiplets? Oh, fucking nothing. So it's a waste of time that Meteor Lake uses chiplets, guys. Like they probably should have just chosen one node, made it smaller, more efficient, higher performance, and called it a day. The reason it makes sense for AMD is AMD is using the same chiplets between Epic and their consumer CPUs. That gives them a ton of flexibility and laptop CPUs and Strix Halo APUs. So the ability to use one chiplet between, Apple competitor APUs, desktop prosumer, and $10,000 Epic chips. That's why you use chiplets to save money across the board. The PlayStation 6, I don't think will be sharing chiplets with anything unless they just literally use like a Zen 7 chiplet that is also in the consumer products. I guess in that perspective, that could make sense. But unless they're going to do that, and I find that unlikely, I think they should just make a monolithic die. Maybe put cache on top of it, like Vcache or something. That might be cool. But anything else doesn't really make sense to me, especially again, because they're probably going to 2 nanometer. That's going to be expensive. So expensive means they're not going to want the die to be big. They're going to min-max density like they did with the PS5's die. And so I doubt it's bigger than 300 millimeters squared. I'd be very surprised if it was. And if that's how small it is on 2 nanometer, it's going to have fantastic yields. It doesn't need chiplets. Pat's fan writes in and says, "Thank you for the great content." One of my sources just said, "Nice haircut, nerd." Just got a text that made me laugh. Okay, so we got RDNA 4 questions here. Let me round out the some of these console questions. And let's see. Let me change the color as well. Also, please everybody remember to click the like button. There are 1,700 of you watching. Let's get to at least 1,500 likes, people. And please share it. Make sure you're subscribed. A lot of you get unsubscribed. That always sucks when that happens. Anyways, another Chris writes in and says, "You mentioned in the last episode that a Steam box would be a crazy good move from Valve. Oh, I think it would be now that Xbox is falling apart. Come on, man. Make a console to compete with Sony and to make Linux compete with Windows. I really want the next Steam Deck and Steam machines to go for. But he goes, what performance would you dream it could reach? So this is funny. I think there's a misconception here when I talk about Valve competing in console. Would I be against a high-end Valve console? Something that goes toe-to-toe with the PS5 Pro? No, but that's not what I conceive of them doing. Right now they're, I think, wrapping up the design of the Steam Deck 2. I don't know anything about the specs, only that it's an AMD APU again. What I would suggest though is, especially based on their statement saying they want it to be a lot like so much stronger that it makes a world of difference. Like you notice the difference here. It's not just like, ooh, I'm at 1080p instead of, whatever it is right now. Is it 1600p or something? Like no one's going to care about that. I think what they probably want to try to do is give you an APU that can do like 1080p, like 60, not 40, or 1440p, like 40 VIR high, like a truly modern experience, like AAA experience. And for that, I think they need at least 24 gigabytes of RAM, and also probably performance that approaches Strix Halo LP. That's something I leaked. Watch the Fox Broken Silicon the last time the Fox was on. In that podcast, I leaked Strix Halo LP. That was like a 20 to 24 CU 128-bit variant of Strix Halo. So that's something that would probably, well, it has Infinity Cache. So because of that alone, compared to Strix Point, I'm guessing in gaming it would be like 50% faster or something. So what does that put that at? Well, that puts that at kind of around a 3060, right? Yeah, I think that's what they're going to want. Maybe not quite 3060, but better than Strix Point with, maybe at least 6 cores this time. And so that would be pretty cool. And I think that could, with 24 or 32 gigs of RAM, that could offer you a baseline of performance for a box. So I assume they would have a performance constrained, 15-watt variant. Maybe they even cut it down, right? They remove 4 of the CUs or 2 of the CUs, whatever they can do. And they're like, all right, so this is the whatever it is, right? 20 CU, like, it runs at 2 gigahertz, 24 gigabyte handheld. With this level of performance, you can actually do 1440p 60 medium, 1080p 60 on high or ultra. You can handle ray tracing at some levels. Isn't that great? And then they take the fully enabled 24 compute unit. Again, I don't know that's what the specs will be. I'm just, example. 24 compute unit model. And maybe instead of 24 gigabytes, they give it 32 gigabytes of RAM. And, they put it in a box that's like, let's see here. What we got next to me? They put it in a box that's like this big, and it has a 65-watt TDP. And then that's the Steam machine. And then the Steam Deck 2 will be like $500 because it has an OLED screen. I don't know it does, but bear with me, and a built-in controller. This doesn't come with a controller, or maybe it would, I don't know, but this doesn't come with a screen. We're trading the cost to put the screen and battery in there for just giving it better cooling, and it'll be like $400, and then that's what competes with Xbox. 32 gigabyte, 24 compute unit, and like 3 gigahertz console. Now, would that be as strong as the PS5 Pro? Absolutely not. Would that be kind of close to a PS5 though? Probably close with a better CPU. And if they could charge $400 and it's like, hey, also you can use it you could install Windows on it or just use Linux because it works better. Like that would bring competition to the joke that is the 4 teraflop, $350 Xbox Series S. That is my envisioning of what I hope Valve does. Like they take the same APU, make it stronger than it would have been, relatively speaking before, and they take a version that's clocked higher with better cooling and like a 400, maybe even $300 box. All you need is the APU and a motherboard, and it might not be as expensive as you think. And then they say this is the new minimum for Steam, guys. Like we're tired of seeing people struggle to build a budget PC that has like some old Maxwell 970 they found on eBay for $40. Here's a $400 or $300 box. We're making barely any profit, but we assume you're going to use Steam and we're going to get a cut of every sale. And this is our new minimum for PC gaming. And also that could go toe to toe with Xbox and PlayStation to a certain degree. That's my dream. I don't think they need to make a $1,000, the early Steam machines where they were like putting Titans in them or something, right? With Kepler Titans, I believe that was like a decade ago. I don't think that's the way to go about it. use the same APU, just clock it much faster and sell it in the cheapest box you can to just get gamers on Steam. That's my hope for what they would do. All right. Daniel Martin writes in and says 7800 XT or wait for RDNA 4. I have a 5800X 3D. Nice. I game at 165 hertz and 1440p. Well, they'd be able to handle that pretty easily. I have an Intel A770, so I am mildly desperate. Oh, who swindled you into buying the A770? Let me see. It just depends on current pricing. Did you buy the A770 to support competition? Don't support competition. Support yourself and let the winners win. Let's see. Yeah, it's gone up in price a tiny bit. 470. Oh wow, there was an open box one for 390. I'd say just buy that. So yeah, here's what I'm gonna say. If you can find a 7800 XT right now for like $400, also they're giving you 2 games, Warhammer and Awakening. Unknown Awakening. Yeah, I don't know. If you want those games, that's a big deal, I suppose. If you want those games, get it. You're saving money just by doing that, I guess. But if you can find one for $400, I think RDNA 4 will be $500 to $600, and be, let's see, 40 or 30% faster. So I would say if it's $400, get it. And remember, you don't have to get that. I'm gonna keep recommending the one GPU that is like my favorite one to recommend. Yep, you can get a 6800, and I'll put a link on the show after this isn't live anymore. You can get a 6800 16 gigabyte for 360. That Get the 6800, man. Like, let me see what price performance you'd be looking at there. So 6800. Let's just assume RDNA 4 is going to hit 7900 XT performance or something, maybe better than that. Yeah, and so let's assume it's 600 divided by 360. Yeah, so I mean, you'd get a slightly better deal with a $600 RDNA 4 card than the 6800, but the 6800 it has the same amount of RAM. It's going to run 1440p well, and you can always sell it. Like, let's say you regret it. RDNA 4 comes out, it's $500, and you know 80% faster. It's like, well, you can still sell your 6800 for 250, right? Were you to have a different graphics card, like let's say right now you had a 3070, even with the 8 GB issue, I'd say, well, turn down settings and wait. Or, you had I guess what's another good example? I don't know. That's pretty much it, because anything else would also be from this generation. But or 3060 12 GB. Let's say you had a 3060 12 GB, so VRAM isn't a big issue for you. I'd say wait. I mean, aren't you happy? I mean, you can probably play with DLSS 1440p and medium, can't you? I mean, but you don't. You've got an Intel graphics card, and that means it probably sucks and your games don't work sometimes, especially if they're recent games. So, my recommendation: get the 6800, because the 7800 XT right now costs about 30-40% more, and it's only 30% faster. Yeah, get a 6800 right now. You'll save more money. Otherwise, wait for RDNA 4, unless all your games run well. But you're saying they don't. So if they don't, 6800. And also, you can sell that A770 maybe as a collector's item, or can you? Let's all look at this together. I'm actually very curious, because a lot of people bought A770s for collecting. Actually, if I might show off my light abilities, if you'll look behind me in the blue there is my A770 that I bought for collector reasons. If I wanted to sell it now, would I make any money? Oh, if it's an AIB version, no. But let's say the limited edition variant is selling for about the price it had at launch. So you wouldn't make any money. But if you have one of those, I mean, it's hard to argue with this, isn't it, Daniel? If you have a limited edition A770, you can sell it and get the 6800 for the same price. Why would you not do that? You're going to get a card with the same amount of RAM that's 30-40% faster and actually runs games. So nope, that's my new advice for you. Let me put down timestamp for that one. 6800. Okay. And I suppose, let me see if there's another tip question here. Make sure I don't miss any. No, there's a lot of questions here. Okay. Let me get through some Radeon questions here because I think this is something I'm skipping over, and then we'll go back to talking about PlayStation, everybody, or whatever else you guys want. So, all right, switch the color to red, and here we go. So, um, Grunt Banshee writes in and said, thoughts on the official confirmation that Radeon is abandoning the enthusiast GPU market for the foreseeable future. As a 6900 XT buyer at release, I find this very depressing. I was planning on upgrading this year, and I might have my first NVIDIA GPU in 6 years as a result because I want the best. Personally, I don't see how retreating to the mid-range and below will help Radeon's image or mindshare. I can't imagine I am the only person that shares this view. The way to beat Nvidia is to copy them with a full product stack. Well, yeah, if you could raise expecto patrona, if you could fucking wave a magic wand and be as good as Nvidia, every company would do that, dude. But it's not that simple. There's no magic word Nvidia wand. So AMD's got to decide what they want to do. Right now, they're spanking Intel very badly. They've basically conquered console besides Nintendo, but Nvidia actually is winning Nintendo over again next gen, even though AMD bid against them. So you've got to think about the resources you have. You know, when you look at Radeon reviews right now, a lot of people say, I wish FSR was as good as DLSS. They say that, oh, I wish this one driver issue didn't happen this 1 month. My experience, Radeon's just as reliable as NVIDIA, but you got to admit, late 2019, I think it was, they botched RDNA 1 and Vega drivers. I'm already dating myself. It's like 5 years ago now, if you can believe it. But that did happen, and it hurts their brand when that happens. They need to have less crap. And I think just as much they know that the $500 price point is what people actually care about right now, which I think is true. I don't think anyone wants a $2,000 graphics card, dude. I think all that money that would go into that to make a gaming only $2,000 graphics card would not make the money. It's also about if they can just make a Navi 48, a Navi 44, and call it a day, that's way less products they need to support, which means that's way better driver support and money freed up to work on FSR catching up to DLSS. I don't think anyone, even in a market where people want expensive stuff, which 2 years ago, that's what people wanted. People wanted a 4090. People wanted that 3090. You bought a 6900 XT, Grunt Banshee. But right now, people don't really want more. We've done it. We've solved gaming. Games look great. They run at 60 hertz, even with mid range cards. People want that better experience to be cheaper. And they're not going to pay for that top experience unless AMD's drivers catch up to NVIDIA, or at least features, however you want to put it. And they haven't. So I think it's a smart decision, and it's not weird. They do this all the time. Um, in fact, and I'm going to pivot here to UDNA. Um, Jake Jarman is daddy writes in. Thank you for the tip, and he says, "Why is Radeon going backwards with UDNA, and how many heads rolled after RDNA 3? None, from what I heard. Honestly, I'm not saying they shouldn't have, but they didn't. I think heads are rolling for Zen 5's launch, though. I'll get to that in a second. It seems like a whole new leadership team and direction now. Yeah, I mean, they, it's not that heads rolled. They're just hiring new people to take over this stuff for RDNA Force, though I think it should be better. But why is Radeon going backwards to UDNA? Well, I think it's for the same reason as what I was saying to Grunt Banshee. It's all connected, right? If you think about it, all right. So why isn't AMD making high-end RDNA 4? Because they know that no one's going to buy a high-end card unless their drivers are up to snuff, and they want to focus on just doing what they can do well before they go for that again. That argument wouldn't exist if they could also sell it for AI as well, right? Think about what NVIDIA is doing with the 4090. Any gamer who doesn't buy it, send it to AI. Who cares? They'll buy it. You know, the what is it? The 48 gigabyte 4090D. That's an AI card they're sanctioned busting into China. That's what that is right there. AMD can't really do that because their cards are either meant for gaming or compute. All of you should be happy, I think. This is my hot take, everybody, on UDNA, that AMD is going back to merging their architectures because that will make them make a high-end product. As long as the only reason they'd make a high-end gaming card is to hope a bunch of people switch from 4090s to 8900 XTXs, which very few 4090 owners were actually going to upgrade to AMD. They're just going to stay in the NVIDIA ecosystem because, NVIDIA is the best or whatever. That isn't an issue if AMD has incentive to make a high-end UDNA 1 card because they can also sell it into the AI market. I think that's what they're thinking. And I think, when people talk about being sad that AMD officially admitted that RDNA 4 isn't going to be high end, that they're forgetting that they said they did not say forever. There's a lot of hot take clickbaity idiots on YouTube I've noticed that are just like Radeon's gonna die. No, they're not. But they can't afford to make a high-end gaming only card anymore. It just isn't worth it in this market. But if they make one architecture that can be used for gaming and compute, then they can afford to make a high-end graphics card, probably with RDNA 5 or RDNA 6, because now it can also be sold into the AI market. So if you want a high-end AMD graphics card ever again, you should be fucking happy that they're making it able to do compute again so they can justify ever making a high-end gaming card again. Because right now, Bubs, they can't justify it. They just can't. People didn't want people don't want the 7900 XT until, well, it was a dumb price in the first place, but until it's like $700. When they look at that, they go, well, then anything above $700, we got to make sure we can sell to AI. You know what the funny thing is? The 7900 XTX is being bought for AI in decent numbers. So that one got lucky. Anyways, but if it could do AI even better, like as well as Lovelace, they'd be selling way more of them. Let's see what the next question is here. Now, let's get through more of these Radeon questions and go back to PlayStation. So Lucas writes in and says, how much VRAM do you think top RDNA 4 will get? They could probably get away with 16 gigabytes, but 20 to 24 gigabytes could send a real message, or maybe drop a higher VRAM model later on, like the 290X 8 gigabyte. It's 16 gigabytes. I've leaked it. It's going to have 16 gigabytes. Having said that, if they made a 32 gigabyte one that was overclocked, especially if RDNA 4 can match 4080 performance, let's say, again, hypothetical, I think it's between, whatever I said, like above the 7900 XT to around a 4080. But let's say they hit a home run and the 8800 XT can hit 4080 performance, pretty much on the money. What I would then do is I would overclock the snot out of the golden samples to get it so you could argue it's as good as a 4080 Super. Give it 32 gigabytes, and then it might, it might only be 20, 30% behind the 5080. And if it is, guys, that means if they give it 32 gigabytes, they could probably get away with selling it for like $900 or 1,000 and go, yeah, we know the 5080 is 20% more money or 30%, like 20% stronger, but it costs 20% more and we have double the VRAM. Why would you choose NVIDIA? And I think that would win over a lot of 6900 XT owners. Like the person who just wrote in who has a 6900 XT and says, there's no way I'm getting, the, or who says, I'm likely to get NVIDIA next gen because I want the best. It's like, well, what if the 5090 costs $2,500 and has 28 gigabytes of RAM or even 32? And then AMD has a $1,000 card that is like almost double the performance of your card and has double the RAM. That really isn't going to sway you to get that instead of NVIDIA. So that's a scenario I could see them doing that in. But up until now, this is the part you guys actually want to remember. I haven't heard about any 32 gigabyte card. I think it's 16 gigabytes. But I could see that scenario happening if they really wanted to jab NVIDIA and give enthusiast Radeon gamers some consolation prize. Like, no, we didn't make a high-end card, but we did overclock one and give it more RAM. So, maybe you want that. Multinatty writes in and says, hey, Tom, unlike many people who lament AMD's decision to only release mid-range cards for RDNA 4, I find the possibility of close to 4080 or XTX performance for $500 to be very attractive for me as a 6800 XT owner. Do you have any information about its die size and computer AI performance? Well, yeah, I think I've already leaked some AI stuff. Like there's stuff out there about it's much, much better at AI. Also, with PS5 Pro officially announced with PSSR, just like you leaked, will AMD reveal a new version of FSR around RDNA 4's launch? I don't know. I know they're working on a new version of FSR, but you don't need any sources to know that. Of course they are. And I do know that once Sony finished up PSSR, they sent it to AMD to reverse engineer if they wanted to. So I would imagine there's going to be some teaser for the next gen FSR when they announce RDNA 4. I'd be surprised if they didn't. I don't think they're going to have like FSR 3.5, something that can, I don't know that they will have that ready at launch, but they've been working on it for years, so let's hope. Sheriff Lotfeet writes and says, hello, Tom. Hope you and your brother are well. We are. It seems as though this year will be a train wreck in terms of GPU prices. My friend has been asking, What should he purchase for a GPU? He currently still runs a 1080 Ti. Well, then anything, anything's better than that. He wanted a 5090, but that seems to be 2500. I mean, I'm not sure. It could be 1800 or something, but yeah, it might be. Which I told him he probably shouldn't throw that kind of money around when there could be better cards, better price later down the line. Would it be better to just purchase a 6800? Yes. Until the 6090 comes out, I believe they'd be more mindful of pricing with the two competing. What are your thoughts? Yeah, 6800. Keep saying it. 6800. That would be a massive, monumental upgrade from the 1080 Ti. He could actually boot games that require ray tracing now too, which would be nice. And his card's old. I'd get a 1080, I'd get an RX 6800. Unless, like, I don't know what games he plays, but, like, if he just plays Age of Empires 2 and Call of Duty, like, Modern Warfare, like an older Call of Duty or, like, Battlefield, I don't know, 1. If he only plays Battlefield 1 and Age of Empires 2 right now, then I'd say there's no hurt in waiting. But if there are games right now that you have that you either can't boot because they don't support ray tracing or they're just running like complete ass, yeah, dude, get a 6800. I mean, come on. They're so cheap right now. You're getting decent performance there. All right. So we got another PlayStation 5 question here. So let's go into that. Uh, Mr. Unknown X writes in and says, does the PlayStation 5 Pro have an AI chip on the board for PSSR? Yes, or at least it's able to accelerate it with its RDNA 4 derived architecture. Um, Charitard writes in and says, for such a premium product, they don't offer basic features like a stand. Well, the current Slim doesn't come with a stand, I don't believe either. Mike Ibarra said he thinks Sony priced the Pro for enthusiasts that will trade in their PS5 systems. Yeah, I probably. And just testing the waters. Like, I think, and maybe Sony has data that the PS4 Pro didn't really win anyone over. It was just people who had a a PS4 upgraded to it. And based on that, they're like, well, then they'll definitely upgrade to this. Let me put PS5 AI and upgrades and blah, 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 blah. But, I think one thing I would add on to this is I think there's a big misconception here about the PS5 Pro's utility to Sony. I think a lot of people, you see them going, how is this going to win people over? How is this going to win people over? Well, I think the way they would grow market share is dropping the price on the Slim, right? Like if I were them, I would advocate for dropping it to what do I think it should be like 69, 369. That way, if you add the disk drive, it's 450 total. So 369. Also, that way you're like, we refuse to not charge 10% more than the 4 teraflop Xbox Series S guys. We're going to charge 10% more. Sorry. We would do 350 if they drop the price, but we're not. No, we're doing we're doing 370 because there's no way we're charging the same price as that crap box that can't even add a disk drive later. So, that's how they would do it. Any lamenting of the PS5 Pro, ultimately, were Sony to want more market share, they should be dropping the price on the Slim now. I don't think the Pro is really what wins people over for upgrading or for going to their generation of consoles. Um, duh, 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 duh. Super Donut, do you think GTA 6 and other blockbusters will run 4K 60 with ray tracing? I think a lot of AAA games will. GTA 6, again, I think 50-50. With ray tracing on, I don't know. I don't know, because ray tracing is like a decision. It's not like you have to have it. It's like you're deciding how much you want to use and if it's even worth it, or if there's other ways we could get the same lighting effects cheaper. So I'm not going to touch ray tracing, but will most AAA games run close to 4K 60? Yeah. Keep in mind though, they're still going to probably do dynamic resolution because you'd be stupid not to. Like why you're leaving performance on the table if you don't use dynamic res. Like think about it. If you cap a game at 4K 60, that means half of the time when your person's like looking around, there's just performance being left on the table that you could have used for better ray tracing or other effects. I would prefer 4K 60 or even 120 with ray tracing, really hot, like really good special effects and particle effects, but let the dynamic resolution drop to 1800p every now and then, as long as it's locked at 60. You're not going to notice if you're jumping around and it goes from if it goes from 2160 to 1900p for a split second. And that way you're always maximizing performance boosting up and down. But so that type of like 1600p to 4K, usually with ray tracing turned on, if the game supports it, around 60. Yeah, from what I'm hearing and seeing, it's probably going to be capable of it. Matt Adder says, what would have been the price if Jim Ryan was still in charge? And he's the guy who held the controller, and clearly, like anytime Jim Ryan was asked what games is he playing, like he would just say whatever the recent game came out was. Yeah, that Oh, I'm playing the newest Call of Duty. Oh, I'm playing God of War. Yeah, that guy who clearly doesn't play any video games. I don't know. You have to remember this is a company-wide decision. I think Jim Ryan probably would have not affected the price, honestly. Um, let's see here. Got another tipped question. Perfectly Flawed writes in and says, "What do you think of AMD claims that they are leaving high end for market share?" Well, I just went over this. I don't see them gaining with the perception of being generic GPU brands. Well, they gain more market share with what? Let's think about it, everybody. 4870, 5870, 6970 lost market share at the 7970 that went for performance. RDNA 1 sold better relative to NVIDIA than RDNA 2. The RX 580 and 480 did great. Data doesn't suggest what you're saying. You can think whatever you want, but ultimately, I think we've learned that AMD doesn't need the crown to do better than other generations. Scott Ingram writes in, I have an A770 I won in the scavenger hunt. Oh, you actually got one of the scavenger hunts. God, I remember the Intel A770 scavenger hunt where they almost didn't give people what they told them they would. So, hey, look, what can you complain about? You got a free GPU. I would sell it and get a 6800 for the same price if you think you can pull it off, which sounds like you can because it's a limited edition. Would turning on by a controller be technically possible with a Steam machine? Yes, yeah, they would just have to do that. Yeah, I would love that too. You know, something that give you the like with Steam Deck 2 or a Steam box, like turn on with a button. Yeah, they could do that. I think there's technically a way to do it with PC somehow, but it's not easy or always consistent. Any word on AMX instructions or AVX improvements in Zen 6? No, I don't remember off the top of my head anything for that. I'm not saying it won't have for Zen 6 though. I don't remember that being the major thing. It's like about latency in the new layout of Zen 6, but much better memory controller in Zen 6 is what I'm told. Much, much, much better. Like they kind of screwed it up with Zen 5 apparently. So, but I don't think I haven't heard someone go AVX. Like Zen 5 was about AVX. Shaman writes and it says, "Hey Tom, any news on FSR or Rock'em? I love the decision to bring UDNA, and yeah, I mean maybe I'll upgrade from a 4090 to UDNA 1 if it's really powerful because I do want the compute because I use my GPU for work. AMD is a small company, is forced to float four architectures right now. Right, again, right, CDNA, uh, RDNA, Zen, and it's like, they probably need a they're probably realizing they've been biting off more than they can chew, and that's why you've seen so many weird launches out of AMD. They need to reduce the amount of stuff they make. Scott Ingram says it sits in the box. I have a 4090 and 7900 XTX. Well, I don't know. Oh, maybe you're not the person that asked the question. I forgot it. Okay, so you do just have for a special from the scavenger hunt. All right, so I'm been going on for a while here. I actually want to get to another leak that I put in the title, and it's about Zen 5 before I move on to some of the remaining questions, which all involve CPUs. Thought it'd be good to do it in this way. Remember, I only got probably another 15 to 30, 40 minutes in me. So if you have any questions, put them in now. And again, please remember to like this, share it, and subscribe to the channel. All right, here we go. Zen 5 sales leak. So I don't think this one will be that long. Let me see. Let me zoom in. All right. All right. So Zen 5 has now been out for what? About a month. And I'm starting to finally get some sales data in from my sources at retailers and distributors. And here's a quote for you. One of them told me Zen 5 is the worst launch since Bulldozer. Like, no one is buying the thing. The only people really seemingly interested in Zen 5 right now are people that are buying the 9950X because they want it for non-gaming workloads, which in that situation, 650, you're paying like $100 premium over the 7950X. That makes some sense. But even then, it's like a handful at every store. It's selling very, very bad. In fact, Zen 5 is selling so badly that I'm told already there are orders of magnitudes more returns to distributors in AMD, and they're being rejected. So like you're having people like Best Buy or Micro Center corporate level who have warehouses that they could use to ship out to Micro Centers based on which store needs more CPUs, but no stores need more CPUs because no one wants Zen 5. AMD has fundamentally botched this launch, and these people like Micro Centers are trying to ship them back to distributors, which are trying to ship them back to AMD, and they're rejecting them because they can't take the loss. I'm told this could show up on AMD's earnings as really bad losses, and that AMD is not sure what to do. I really think heads are going to roll for this one. And it kind of sounds like AMD's weighing going in two different directions. Number one, which is the one I would advocate for, trying to get Zen 5 X3D out as soon as possible, slashing prices before Christmas or Black Friday is a fall sales deal. I don't know what that price would be. Maybe the 9950X would be 549. They dropped the 12 core to 400, the 8 core to like 300, the 6 core to 250 or something drastic. And then they try to have some 9800 X3D come out at the same time and force reviewers to retest everything with the newest drivers. They're considering that, or just doing slight deals and actually delaying X3D to let Zen 5 sell through before they do a reboot with like an all X3D lineup, or maybe not all X3D. Maybe there'd also be a 9800X, that replaces basically at the same price the 9700X and 9700 for like 300, 9600 for 200. Like that's the type of thing. So it's basically either they just eat the losses now, or they just kind of say, no one's buying Intel anyways. We're going to let Zen 4 sell out. When Zen 4 sells out, we'll do slight deals on Zen 5, and then we'll launch X3D. And the reason they would go with that second option, that again, I'm sure all of you watching this right now think is terrible, is because that's just how much stock they have that they don't know if they can afford to write off. Because if they drop prices, think about what that means for AMD. If they drop a 9950X from 650 to 549, what are they going to have to do? Give a $100 rebate card to every CPU sold or every CPU stocked at a Micro Center or a Best Buy or on Newegg or Amazon, because they're going to have to go, well, we dropped the price. We basically now need to give you a giant payment for taking these at a higher price at first. So it's really bad. It's really, really bad. And I said to one of my sources, it really doesn't surprise me that Zen 5 is selling worse than Bulldozer, because at least with Bulldozer, right, it's first 8 core, right? You could get on like a normal desktop, and like it's not that this is as bad as Bulldozer. It's not. It's far better. And AMD isn't as much of a trouble because it's still selling very well in laptops. Strix is selling well. It's going to sell well in Epic, but there's not really a reason to get it. I mean, Zen 4, what? It runs games at 200, 300 frames a second. Like, why do you need Zen 5? And the only reason would have been if it was like firmly 5-10% better in gaming and the same price. And it's not there yet. And AMD is realizing they really, really, really miscalculated. Again, I think heads will roll on this one. So with all of that in mind, actually, I would suggest one thing to AMD, and I'm sure they've already thought of this, is I think what AMD needs to do is do at least a small price cut, eat the loss, announce X3D so people get excited again, launch something, anything, a 9800X for 400, just something like an 8 core with I would say a 120 watt TDP that can boost to 5.7 gigahertz or 5.6. They need to launch that with the new driver. So, Hardware Unboxing Gamers Nexus say, wow, this beats the 9700X by like 10% or 5% in gaming, and multi-threading, it beats it by another, 10, 10% or something because the higher boost clocks. And they go, this is what we were promised. This is what Zen 5 should have been like. It's now safe to buy Zen 5 with us retesting in this new product. I think they need to do that, slight price cuts, and then they need to bundle this with system integrators. I think the one thing AMD could do, take back all those chips that are being rejected by Micro Centers and Best Buys and Newegg because they're not selling. Take them back, AMD, buy them back, and bundle them with system integrators around when RDNA 4 launches. Like, just give the system integrators a discount, bundle them with RDNA 4. That's really the only thing I can see AMD doing, because again, Zen 5 isn't bad. It just launched with bad settings and bad software and cost too much for what you're really getting relative to Zen 4. So if you had a gaming PC though, and a system integrator could get an 8800 XT and a 9700X, and they gave them $100 off for bundling them, which I think a lot of system integrators would do that right now. I don't think anyone's going to look at a 9700X and a pre-built system and go, that would suck. They're just going to say, I don't want to pay a premium for it. So that's what I think AMD should do. And that is what is going on with Zen 5 right now. Just meteoric, bad, 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 bad sales. And heads are going to probably roll on this, and AMD's kind of freaking out behind the scenes. Anyways, let me move on now to some Arrow Lake information as well. I'm not going to call this a real leak here because I'm kind of waiting for more information to round all of this out. But I will say I've already like Cinebench multi-threading scores for Arrow Lake. It suggested to me that it is like 10 to 25% faster in multi-threading than Raptor Lake. Refresh, which isn't a surprise. That's about what I expected as well. But I've seen some more that involve single threading, and I just need to confirm the exact boost clocks these tests were being done at, because you don't want to get this wrong. Like, you can see a horrible score, but if it's running half as fast as its predecessor, whoa, that's actually pretty good if it was that high. Or if it's running actually faster than expected. Like, there are a lot of people that got Zen 5 leaks wrong because they looked at some benchmarks that were like a 6.2 gigahertz water cooled, like not even water, like liquid nitrogen sample, and they're like, that's all Zen 5. I need to confirm that. But what I have seen of single threading performance in Arrow Lake is that it looks like it's plausible it does beat Zen 5 in single threading by at least 5% and maybe 10. So we'll see. Just throwing it out there. Another little thing that I'm hearing about Arrow Lake, but I feel got fairly confident it's going to at least slightly beat Zen 5 in single threading. However, keep in mind the 7800X3D, what is it, 5 to 10% faster in gaming than Zen 5 base? That means they're still probably tying or trading blows to the 7800X3D. It still probably means the 9800X3D is going to win gaming. But at least for some production workloads, mixed workloads, I could see the i9 being okay. All right, now let us move on to some CPU questions here. All right. Compressed AI Blocks writes in and says, in the last Broken Silicon, Dan made an excellent point of everyone always talking about i9 performance, but it really needs to be the i7 that we're comparing with AMD's best gaming CPU. Where do you see Arrow Lake i5 and i7 performance falling? Additionally, do you think the i5 parts will suffer the most from lack of hyperthreading in gaming due to potentially having to use E-cores more often? Yes, but I think they're going to do that, like, what was it called? Something PO or whatever that thing Intel did with 14th gen, where they optimized super hard so some games got higher performance because they better scheduled between the P and E cores, like they programmed to the metal. I think Rainbow Six Siege is one of those games. Was it APO? I think that might have been what it was. I think that's just what they're going to do with Arrow Lake in general. I think, again, that coming to Raptor Lake Refresh first was Intel putting out an early version of whatever they were doing for Arrow Lake, because they know the E and the P cores have to work together well if there's no hyper-threading for games that need more than 6 threads, which basically all of them use more than 6 threads now. So I wouldn't worry too much about that with the i5 yet. Something to think about, but I don't worry too much about that. But what I will say is, yeah, they're clocked lower. And if you look at the Lunar Lake lineup right now, which there should be a link in the description, you can see that the bottom Lunar Lake chip is clocked like over 10% slower than the Ultra 9 variant. And I don't believe that's really true with the initial launch of Zen 5, right? The 9700X, what is it clocked at? Is it 5.4 gigahertz or something? Yeah, so it's because chiplets allow better, more consistent yields. It's 5.5 gigahertz. Right, so think about that. That's almost not different. Like 5.7 in the 9950X divided by 5.5, you're looking at 4%, really 3.6% higher clocks. When you look at Lunar Lake, which I believe is 5.1 divided by 4.5, that's 13% higher clocks. So think about that. Yeah. When I say the Ultra 9 285K, I think that's what it'll be called for Arrow Lake. When I say that product might beat Zen 5 in gaming by 5. Well, I don't know about gaming, but in single threading, which isn't the same thing, by 5 to 10%. You have to remember the i5 is going to probably be clocked like 10% lower, at least 5%, which means, yeah, I don't know. I think in the mid range in gaming, AMD is going to do fine with their X3D chips, more than fine, because that's really neat compared to the 9800 X3D to the i5 and the i7. So it's pretty simple. It'll be probably at least 5% slower, which means for gaming, the price performance I don't think is really going to be there for Arrow Lake, from what I'm seeing here, compared to even Zen 4 X3D probably. Compressed iBox writes in again and says, Tom, it's been a wild news month. Boy, has it. What is the biggest piece of news in your opinion? Mine would be Royal Core cancellation. I agree. It wasn't my best performing video. Of course, everyone wanted to know about RDNA 4 that got over 100,000 views. A 5090 video still getting over almost up to 200,000 views now. But I think the biggest news was Pat killing Royal Core. Like, that means 1 out of 2, only 2 of their client design teams is gone. That means after Arrow Lake, and especially after Nova Lake, I would really worry that if Intel can keep pace with AMD in CPU design, unless they're rebuilding that team right now. But I don't know who wants to really work there anymore on that. Ivalens writes in and says, today, so 9/11, so yesterday, news has been Intel chipsack money being delayed by officials at the Defense Department. Write that down as a timestamp. All right. It is an election year, so each side may be hesitant to prop up a failing business, as opposed to, well, they're propping up steel, right? Which most economic experts I've followed think that actually that Japanese steel companies should be able to merge with the American one so that they don't go out of business. But so I wouldn't say they're always against propping up a company during an election year. But as opposed to Boeing, who has long been propped up, is the U.S. government now more inclined to support an entity operating on American soil over any American-owned entity operating on multiple soils and is unstable? Probably. I mean, I don't know how this, like, I don't know how people keep saying this. The government's going to bail out Intel. Why? How? Is there any evidence? Like, they are bailing out, they're putting money into TSMC and Samsung right now to build fabs in the South and around, like in Phoenix and Arizona. So, no, I think that there is a lot of hesitancy right now in the United States government to prop up. They don't want to bail out a company. They don't want to feel like they're helping Intel more than Intel's helping the United States if it means they can go to TSMC and Samsung to build foundries in the United States anyways. Like I really think Intel is going to get a decent amount of money here, but people got to stop thinking they're just going to be saved by the U.S. government because so far I'm not seeing the evidence, man. They're sending billions to their competitors and they're withholding funding. I think they're spooked on if Intel's worth funding anymore. I really do. Kenwin25 writes in, he says, "Hey Tom, seeing Royal Core canceled really bummed me out." Me too. I have to admit the CPU market has been boring to me of late. Even if Zen 5 came out with 25% greater performance, what would that really do for me? What? So now I'm gaming at 1080p at 800 frames per second instead of 700, or finish my renders, 20% faster when they're already getting done in minutes. Royal Core, though, from what you said, felt like the next great step in CPU technology, and to see Pat take it behind the barn is frustrating. In my opinion, this should be the final nail in the coffin for Pat's time as Intel CEO. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a disaster. So don't want to be mean about it and beat a dead horse though. TMC Paint writes in, "Howdy Tom. What will you do differently about future architecture predictions with AMD's internal performance prediction woes and Intel losing any concept of accurate roadmaps?" Yeah, well, they're not predictions unless I say it's a prediction. Sometimes I'm just reporting on what they're saying, and if they're wrong, then they're wrong. I'm just reporting to you the news. Um, but at the end of the day, Zen 5 hit the IPC they marketed. It just didn't translate to gaming, and that's at least a failure on AMD's part, no matter how you dice what kind of failure it is. Otherwise, though, I will say this: let's see how Zen 5 ages and the software turns out. Give it a year. Like there could be more updates. I've even heard there could be new steppings for some Zen 5 products coming out, which is there's other reasons why that would be really slimy in my opinion. But like there's this story isn't over, and I believe games are likely to age better with Zen 5 than people expect. Like go look at how Zen 4 performed at launch, compare that to Zen 3 now. It's wildly faster. Like actually the 5800 X30 has fallen behind where it was a couple of years ago because the Zen 4 architecture is just being leveraged better. I think that's going to doubly happen to Zen 5. Now it's starting from a lower starting point though. So if Zen 5 is 2 to 5% faster than Zen 4 in gaming, will it end up 10 to 15 eventually? Maybe, but it's not going to end up like 20 to 30 like Zen 4 did over Zen 3. Um, Dave Schultz writes in, with the not so well received launch of Zen 5, do you think it'll be more likely for us to see 8 X3D cores plus 16 C core variants? Think it'd be more likely. No, no. And I think when I look at the bandwidth problems of Zen 5, I think that makes me all the more so all the more so feel like we're not probably getting above 16 cores. Like, could they launch an 8 plus 30, 8 plus 16, or 16 plus 16, just 32 Zen 5C product to AM5? From what I'm told, they could. But when I see how they're doing with bandwidth now, doesn't seem like that would really make sense to me. Um, all right, let's see. Keta Fuki writes in and says, I hope I'm wrong though about that, Dave. What are our chances that Zen 5 X30 will have cross CCX Vcache? Is that even on the horizon? I feel like that would solve their CCX latency issues. It'd almost explain why the cross CC latency got worse at Zen 5. Well, maybe. I mean, right now it already shares cache though in the IO die, right? So you've already got that. Now, I guess what you're saying is we had just one giant sheet of cash over the whole thing they could all borrow from. I don't know. It would probably be better, but I haven't heard anything about that. I think that's something that'll probably happen in the future, and I hope I'm wrong. Here's what I'll say. maybe I'm wrong. I continue to think that AMD has at least one more trick up their sleeve that hasn't been leaked yet about Zen 5 X3D. I suspect that I'm not sure what. Okay, if it's a way bigger boost and really Zen 5 was built with Vcache in mind, or if they do have like some CCX uniting cache, or they're putting cache on both of them, or it's more cache per sheet. Although I think we've seen leaks that suggest that it's the same amount of cache per core they're adding again. But I continue to think something's probably up that we don't know about. Could be wrong, but that's how I'll answer your question. And again, I hope I'm right about that because they really need it right now. Fezzi writes in, what about a Steam machine using Halo Strix 40CU 8 16 core? They use too much power, man. I don't think so. I think they'd rather use cut down models. Could it be in the $400 range? No. If they use Strix Halo, no. If they use Strix Halo in the Steam Deck, you're looking at especially full Strix Halo. So what? I'll have 32 gigabytes, I think, at the minimum is what they're going with Halo in their configurations. Like you have to have at least 32, I believe. No, you're looking at $1,000 device right there because they'll be competing with $2,000 laptops, my dude. Thank you for writing in though, Fessy. All right, let me see. Other tipped questions. Let me see. There's Fezzi's. All right. Mr. W writes in, going for the W with this question. What's Zen 5 about Zen 5 gaming performance? Is it architecture limited, latency limited, bandwidth limited, or software limited? All of the above, maybe. I mean, it seems like there's something at least right now going on with CCX to CCX latency. No one I asked can really entirely explain it, by the way. There was one CPU architect I talked to about it. I forgot what they said though, but like it is plausible that there's like something they can do. Like, right. So here's the theory that I proposed. I asked, is it a microcode thing? The person said probably not. And then suggested maybe someone just screwed up, it happens. But I also suggested this theory that for power consumption saving reasons, like, Strix right now, people, Zen 5 Strix APUs, they try to disable when power gating as much of the APU as they can to save energy. So, like, sometimes I'm told, or I think I read that even involves if you have 4 cores, like 4 Zen 5 cores in that 12 core APU, they'll turn off 2 cores and load up both threads on 2 of the cores instead of using 4 cores, so they can just save energy not loading up the other cores, like until the workload gets high enough that it would actually save more energy to enable more of them. I wonder if Zen 5 desktop is doing that. I wonder if like what we're looking at is they are just disabling the CCX to save energy or part of it. And this ridiculous CCX to CCX latency is basically a waking up from sleep latency. I don't know if that's true, but I think that could be a culprit. I also think there's software. So I imagine it's a couple of things, but no matter how you dice it, AMD screwed up this launch, Shaman writes in again. He says, you're the man, Tom. Well, thank you for the tip. Your leaks have helped a lot. Get yourself another beer. Consider adding some Rock'em FSR news. It really helps all of your machine learning and AI engineer viewers. I know it's helped me and my team with sourcing. Well, again, merging, I'll say this to you, my friend. CDNA and RDNA, it's just going to make them want to work on the same software stack that would benefit you more, so Analog Dopamine writes in and says, Intel 7700K is outselling some Zen 5s on Amazon. Told you it's the worst launch since Bulldozer, even worse. This might be one of the worst launches, if not the worst in AMD history. What do you want me to tell you? I believe it. I mean, yeah, it's bad. Waleed is now, it cut off your name. Any new PSVR 2 remaining stock and production? Yeah, because wasn't there a rumor that Sony's ending PSVR 2 production? Or at least winding it down to a very low amount? Let's see. Well, it's kind of bounced back up in price, but they're probably because it's not easy to get a hold of. No, I haven't asked anyone about this, honestly, so I really can't tell you much, except that unless you see some big VR game coming out, I don't know why Sony would make a whole lot more of them. LCC Gaming, give me a tip. Thank you for the tip. And there's a question. All right, I think I'm on my last couple ones here. All right, let's see. Satisfactory 1.0 out. Get it, guys. Also get Astrobot. Thank you, Tom. Guess he paid $5 for an ad for a couple games. Ricardo Demora, cut off your name. He says, Manda salve para o Brazil. Hello, my Brazilian friend. Used to speak a tiny bit of Portuguese, but forgot it the second I stopped using it, unfortunately. So we're through the tipped questions. I have a few more Patreon questions. Also, I'll start looking at the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, where in the after video chat channel, you can put in free questions right now. Again, guys, support us on Patreon. You can ask questions right now for free right there. But anyways, we like the tips anyways here. Shaman writes in, yes, our dev team couldn't be happier about the UDNA announcement, buying more AMD and supporting open source. Very good. All right. Shay writes in, should gaming CPU reviewers focus on 1% lows instead of averages now? Let me put down a timestamp here. A percent versus averages. I don't know. The problem with 1% lows is you got to do it right. You got to have really good, consistent testing methodology, really high quality equipment. I think you should still do both so that it's easy to peer review each other. That is my opinion on the 1% lows um versus average frame rates. But the problem is if you look at average frame rates and 1% lows, I know most people aren't going to look at the 1% lows as much. It is what it is. I think But I think that's why you have to do both still. You can focus on the 1% lows more, but you should still do both. Gian Violi writes and he says, hi, Tom. With recent Windows issues being as bad as they've been, do you see more boutique retailers such as Minis Forum putting more focus on Linux support? I expect mainstream OEMs to stay on Windows no matter what, since that is what most people use, even in professional settings, according to the latest Stack Overflow developer survey. But people are going to, for this boutique retailer, are more likely to be willing to experiment, yeah, probably with Linux. I think if there's a really, really good open, works on everything SteamOS distro, that's when they'll do it. That's when I think they would bother. I don't think they would bother with the other Linux now, and I hope they do. Um, Moonshine Octopus writes in and says, Tom, your recent admission that you knew about Apple's M1 Ultra Fusion connection of the two M1 Max chips 6 months before release piques my interest. Have you heard anything else about other Apple stuff, like fusing 4 Max chips together soon, or are AMD exploring this type of chip connection at all? Yes, they are. Well, aren't they already doing stuff like that? I don't know. The AMD is mostly focused on chiplets, so either for CPU or GPU packaging, or my misunderstanding that this is what they're essentially doing already in their MI300 range. Well, I think they basically did that with their MI250X. What about RDNA 5? I don't know. I think it's more traditional at AMD or traditional to what they're usually doing for most of the time right now. I think that's the way NVIDIA and Apple want to do things. But if I'm being honest, I haven't really asked about this any time recently. Moonshine Octopus writes, and again, could the MI300 game? Not really. How would it stack up to the 4090 or 5090? Horribly. I think we already saw some weird testing of that, and it was like not even really a game, and it was a misleading benchmark as well. Or should I say, I think a lot of websites misreported what the benchmark actually found. All right, let me see here. Big Boss 69 writes in SteamOS. And he asks from the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, hey, Tom, what tech release are you most excited about in the next 6 months? And what CPU and board upgrade would you aim for from a 9900K in Black Friday sales? Well, it depends how cheap Zen 5 gets. If Zen 5 gets cheap enough, then I'll have to talk about that. But otherwise, yeah, go to Micro Center. Again, click the links in the description. Make sure they know I sent you. Get 7600X3D with 32 gigabytes RAM. I mean, that'd probably be good enough, unless you need more cores. You probably don't, though. I mean, 6 Zen 4 cores are like what? Almost double each per one is almost double the performance of a Skylake core. So, I mean, you're getting decent multi-threading compared to what you have now, even with a 6-core Zen 4 X3D. So that'd be my general recommendation for you. Unless you want more than that, then just get the same thing everyone and their mom are buying right now, 7800X 3D. But if you want it for production, I will say Zen 5's multi-threading is actually quite a bit better than Zen 4's. So if that were to get to the same price or cheaper than a 7800X 3D, if this was for work, I would consider that. But it has to be the same price or cheaper, preferably cheaper, and it needs to come with the same deals, because otherwise just get Zen 4X 3D over Zen 5. All right. And then I believe we had one other question here. Where is it? Where do you put that? Put in reader meter general. No, I don't. Dead writes in from the Moore's Laws at Discord and says, "What do you think about a possible comeback of a Steam Machine as a console-like device?" So I've already talked about this in detail. Do you think it would be ever able to put a dent into current console market, or would devs start to support it as a dedicated platform? Yeah, I think both. I think it could. I think it really could. Is it going to compete with Sony like Microsoft did, where it's like, what apples to apples comparisons and like, winning over a total market share of like what is the probably 150 million and divided up between Xbox and Sony? Um, no, but I think what you could do is eat away at some of the cheaper Xbox gamers, bring them home to daddy, come back to PC. We built it for you. You don't need to build it yourself. We removed the Windows issues. I think a Steam machine could do that. Um, and then I also think it could eat away at some of the more casual PlayStation gamers as well, or maybe less casual. The people that are like, I'm not paying 450 for a PlayStation 5. Oh, this Steam machine is actually, most of the performance with 24 gigabytes of RAM for, 300, 400 bucks. Yeah, 300, especially that much. Yeah, I'll buy this over the PlayStation 5. It works fine for me. I think there's a lot of people that would do that. Michael Mooney writes in, what about putting stacked 3D cache chiplets between CCD chiplets in a shared 2.5D configuration? Well, I think better would just be to stack the die on top of a bunch of cache, and then instead of it going to the IO die is below the CPUs, so that there's less distance to communicate with that cache. That's what I would say. Um, Steam machines with DLSS would be huge. Is Zen 3 production ending for all models? Just the 5800X 3D. Yeah, I leaked that. Yeah, just the 5800X 3D is having its production ended. Where the disc used for Game Pass, fake outrage. Will Atari release a Jaguar Plus? I don't know. Is the Switch 2 going to be 400 to 450? I don't know. My gut tells me the Switch 2 will be $399. That's my guess. But if it firmly beats the Steam Deck, and I could see them trying to get away with 500. Don't you guys think for the Switch 2, 399, that's just enough where it's like, yeah, they're charging a more premium price than the Switch, but it's like just at that price point though, where it feels cheap relative to other consoles right now. They're going for 700. You have to think about that too. Nintendo's pricing the Switch 2 in a world where there's a $700 PlayStation and Microsoft is falling apart. So if you're them, you'd go, yeah, $400 is more expensive than we'd usually charge at Nintendo, but 399 looks like a deal compared to the PS5s, kind of. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's what they probably go for. I could see 450 or 499. I feel like 399 is the slam dunk, though, and I'm pretty sure they can afford that easily and still make a profit. Like what did the Nintendo MSRP? Because it's like they're charging 349 right now, right? Yeah, just add $50 to it. I could see 399 or 449. I think that's where it's just cheap enough, uh, next to the competition where it does still kind of look budget there. 299. I don't think they're charging 299 for the Switch, dude. So the same price as the current one? No, I don't think so. Unfortunately. Um, right, and it probably does it need to beat the Steam Deck's price? I don't know. I think they could be a similar price though. Janos writes in, are you upgrading from your 5950X soon? I don't know. Probably not. Well, I don't know. We'll see. If the whole system falls apart, then I guess I'd just upgrade probably to Zen 5 or something. But I don't know. I also have this backup system with a 16 core Zen 4 in a 7600 that I could probably just set if my big desktop like remain broken forever, probably just sell off the parts and then just make do with this minis forum system until what I want is actually a thing, and then build it during Christmas or something. That's probably what I would do. You want a disk drive, buy the $600 Series X. How about you don't buy any fucking Xbox? How about that, dude? I mean, some of these arguments here from fanboys, it's like, if you want a disk drive, like buy the $600 Series X. No, what people are going to go do is go buy a PS5. Like $600 for the same console they've been selling this whole time, where they make you buy PlayStation Vita memory cards. It's just a stupid slap in the face to their fans. I mean, come on. No. Yeah, no one's laughing with you, man. You're laughing by yourself in the corner over there. Let's see. Those are just people arguing with each other. All right, I think that's it. I got through the questions. I got through most everything that I wanted to talk about. And I got some pretty big leaks out about Zen 5 and the PS5 Pro. So I think we're going to call it a day on this one. This was a really popular one. Make sure you like it, share it, comment below. And please, guys, like half of you aren't subscribed to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Moore's Law Z YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Patreon. The lowest tiers lets you ask us questions. Oh, PSA. Hardware Unboxed was supposed to come on this weekend. He's going to come on in a few weeks from now. And instead, a game developer, Brian Heemskirk, is going to come on to talk about the PS5 Pro. I think that works out better, frankly, in timing anyways. But Steve had work to do on the studio, so he had to delay it because I guess they'll be tearing it up when we were supposed to record. So Hardware Unboxed is still coming on. Remember, you join the Patreon, can ask some questions for free. Can ask a game developer about the PS5 Pro questions. If you join the lowest tier on the Patreon, those question requests will go out tomorrow. So please support us on Patreon. Cannot do this without our patrons. And, I had to hire a lawyer to protect me from Sony when I leaked that stuff. So this does cost money in addition to providing food, for my family. So if you got the money, thank you. Otherwise, though, of course, thanks for just watching this. That helps as well. I'm really appreciative of how large this channel has grown over the past 5 years. It's been crazy. I couldn't have done it without you. Starting to get sappy and ramble. That means I need to stop talking and finally eat dinner. So have a good evening and a good weekend, everybody.